You surface from the underground at Piccadilly Circus.
Mind the gap.
Making your way through the glittering lights of London's West End, you take a turn down a quaint-looking street into the notorious neighborhood of Soho. The lights are up, the crowd is buzzing, and you just stepped into the best seat in the house. Welcome to The Big Smoke, a variety show podcast. I'm Kevin Bennett, and I'll be your guide through this experience of comedy, conversation, and community. Well, it's the quintessence of an unquestionably quirky and quacky episode this week at The Big Smoke. We're introducing a brand new segment, a visit with our resident doctor, Dr. Quack. And this week's Victorian parlor game is truly an oddball delight, the elephant's foot umbrella stand. But the real heart of this episode is a special conversation with Olivier Award-winning star of the London stage and my dear friend Giles Terera. His journey treading the boards has been full of unexpected twists, surprising inspirations, and more than a few magical turns. From Neverland to the American Revolution to a haunted castle in Denmark. But before we bring him in, let's see if you can follow the plot twists, because it's time to play Stump the Room! First up, in Steven Spielberg's 1991 film Hook, which now famous actor made one of her very first screen appearances as young Wendy, Peter Pan's future wife, long before winning an Oscar in another film for playing someone who fell in love with William Shakespeare. Next, before Pistols at Dawn, there were rules to keep duels civilized. In Lin-Manuel Miranda's groundbreaking musical Hamilton, those rules inspired one of the show's biggest songs. What real-life document were they based on? And finally, in Shakespeare's Hamlet, which character never says a single word on stage, but still sparks one of the most famous speeches in all of theater history? Think you know the answers? Share this episode with your friends and see how many you can figure out. All will be revealed at the end of the episode. It's time to welcome our first guest. Giles Terera is an award-winning actor, musician, and filmmaker, best known for his work in theater as the original Aaron Burr for the London production of Hamilton. Soon to be playing Hamlet at the Chichester Festival Theatre, please welcome Giles Terera.
Welcome to The Big Smoke, Giles Terera.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
It's going well. I'm glad to be here. This is
Nice
great.
to see you.
Finally.
Well, I want to say to anyone listening that I see you pretty regularly. Sometimes when you're in a play, I don't see you for a while, but we often go get deep dish pizza is our little tradition.
Yeah.
And go for walks through London. And actually, I live in the place that I've lived for the last 7 years because of you. You introduced me to our building manager.
This is true, yeah.
And so
You're
a lot
welcome.
Thank you very much. I've brought you here today just to thank you for this. Okay, there's a few different things. Obviously, you're a successful actor, playwright. And I was thinking as I was preparing, reading your fantastic book and thinking about your work and just our friendship and relationship. And I was thinking if there was a way for us to make this conversation also for maybe someone who isn't in the industry, maybe someone who's seen a couple plays but is not really in the know. I think that could be potentially, useful or interesting to people. I want to start with just tell me the moment.
Well, we're having a conversation. The thing I like about podcasts is I like them when they're conversations rather than they're not interviews really.
First question number one.
Yeah.
Tell me this.
Yeah, where were you born?
The thing about someone who you've known for it's been almost 10 years, right? Is that you build, it's been 9 years, which I would say is almost 10. That's how I would define it.
Yeah, 10 comes after 9.
10 comes after 9, and we're pretty much at 9.
Yeah.
This spring, because it was spring, I think, when rehearsals started. So we did a play together at the Globe Theatre. But the thing is, and we'll talk about that, but the thing I was thinking about with any friendship is, any good friendship or friendship that I cherish, this is one of them.
Right answer.
What if I was like, there's lots of others, this one not so much. But you start to build, one of my favorite things about longtime friendships is you build these, I guess they're inside jokes, but they're not even jokes. They're just like reference points to a relationship that you kind of reference back. And there's something really, the longer the time passes, the more I treasure those reference points.
Okay.
So maybe I'll tell you my reference points, like the three biggest ones for me with you. One of them is the Blue Man Group.
Yeah.
Okay, which has nothing to do with the actual Blue Man
You
Group.
need to explain that then.
Okay, let me tell my three reference points and then we'll explain it. So Blue Man Group, China, and Deep Dish are the three that I thought of that are kind of like reference anchors to our relationship. So the first time we really connected, we'd been working on a play. I was the associate director at the Globe, Merchant of Venice, preparing to go on a big tour all over the world. And you played the Prince of Morocco in the play. So actor, associate director. And obviously we connected a little bit, during rehearsals. I got to know you and stuff. But I feel like the moment we really connected was the third location. We were in Liverpool, then New York, then Chicago. For some reason, I don't know why it was just you and me, but we decided to go to the Contemporary Art Museum. And somehow, I think just banter emerged, which to me was the beginning of the friendship.
Yeah.
How did Blue Man Group emerge in your mind? Do you remember this?
I can't. Yeah, I do, but I can't remember. Like the beautiful thing about those references is then the longer time goes on, you sort of forget where they came from. Sometimes I don't remember how Blue Man Group it came about. I remember I wasn't particularly. I was preparing to meet the people for Hamilton.
Yeah.
When I was in New York and
which
Liverpool
was
first.
Right before Chicago. Yeah.
No, Washington was in between. So we were in Liverpool, then New York, then we went to Washington for a week, and then Chicago. So all that time, I was in Hamilton.
Yeah, you're right.
mode.
Okay,
I was preparing for that audition, so I wasn't really available. Everyone was like, "Who is this guy?" So I wasn't really. So it was after all that was done, then I could be like, "Oh wow, there's this very cool guy who's been helping us how to do Shakespeare for the last month or whatever." And I don't really know anything about him, so we were just hanging out. But I think it was something to do with the museum.
It was. I think there was some art. Okay, so, and this is why I love a lot of my friends are actors and theater people, but I'm sure this exists in other worlds too. But we just started making up stories as if we were taking each other on a museum tour of the art gallery.
Right.
And I don't know if it was you or me or what, but one of the images had blue in it.
Right.
Blue people or something.
Right.
I don't know. Painted blue.
Okay, yes.
So somehow the story became that the backstory of this painting, whatever the painting was, had something to do with the Blue Man Group, or it was inspired by it. Anyways, it's for the listener, this is probably completely not interesting, but the funny thing is it's like the origin of one of the core things that I think of when I think about our friendship. Yeah. It's just this thing. And then, of course, it evolves into who knows what it is. Yeah. Of course, Deep Dish is a little more obvious because we had Deep Dish in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then we discovered
Deep Dish pizza is like the Chicago thing.
I should say pizza, yeah.
Which you can't get here in England. So
well, and then we discovered there was a place that had very good deep dish pizza, not quite the same as Chicago, but pretty similar in central London. So we went to that, and that's become one of our traditions.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about ritual, because I think a lot of, as theater makers and people who tell stories and stuff, I think a lot about ritual and how ritual is supposed to connect us to something that happened a long time ago. You have the drink the blood of Christ, and that connects you to the original source. And in a weird way, deep dish pizza is kind of that for us. Because it's every time we go for a deep dish pizza, this seems ridiculous, but it on some subconscious level reminds me of the first time we connected.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Is it these traditions?
Yeah, and that's kind of how we work, really.
Tradition.
It was such an amazing experience in Chicago that, I'd want to go there now. So it makes sense that our little blood of Christ moment is actually deep dish pizza.
And then we went, and then the third one I should just explain, which I said is, so Blue Man Group, Deep Dish, and China is because a huge part of the tour is we spent a month and a half in China, and we were in Hong Kong as well. Yeah. And it was for me, it was such a massive learning experience going to somewhere where the culture is so different and yet telling essentially the same story that we told in London and New York and Chicago and these other places.
Yeah.
And seeing the reaction. What was your experience like when we did that?
In China?
Yeah.
Well, the thing about art now you're talking about Blue Man Group, and it is funny, and for us it is funny, and we'll joke about it when we reference it and it comes up. But at the same time, exactly what you're talking about is art has the immediate thing that you get. So if you're looking at the Mona Lisa, if you're looking at a production of Hamlet or whatever, there's that immediate thing. But then there's also these ripples, which actually the people who started the Blue Man Group have no idea that we have then sort of take what they've done, and then that happened in a specific place in a specific country, and then that's become a sort of shorthand for something else that we do, and it's led to this whole other thing. And it's the same in China. You can't really predict the ripples that are gonna, a result from the initial thing. So for me, it was about being open to that. Being in China, I was like, I want to go somewhere completely different culturally. I'd been in Japan before that, and it was a similar feeling of like, okay, I can't understand anything that's written on signs, on the subway, on the metro. So you're completely unable to rely on the things that you would normally do. If you're going around Europe or whatever, you can go, okay, right, well, that's the exit and that's the thing. Whereas actually there, it was like, okay, I'm completely at sea in unfamiliar territory, and I love that about it.
Well, the other thing too about it is China compared to, I'm not sure about Japan, but even compared to Hong Kong, was in terms of signs and just the simple fact of getting around and communicating with people, a lot of the Western technology, whether it be Google or WhatsApp or Google Maps and stuff, didn't work in China.
That's right.
So
I love that about it.
I know
everyone was freaking out, and
you
I'm
have
like,
to
this
embrace
is good.
it. You have to embrace it because it's your culture shock completely, and you don't have all these things that are kind of our security blankets.
Right.
But actually, that's a really interesting point that you said about how stories and connection points and ideas kind of evolve. And we're joking about Blue Man Group, but actually I never thought about it that way, in terms of, we took a play that we built in the UK that was written 400 years ago by Shakespeare, obviously famous writer, and it is so much a part of, obviously, in British but also American, North American, culture. The play was The Merchant of Venice, which has a lot of other things in it in terms of the relationship between the Jewish characters and the Christian characters, and the conflict, the religious conflict, and we have certain connections to that have evolved over time through just everything in our society. And what we didn't know going there was what those people's connections were with that story. So it was a really eye-opening experience. And I found myself questioning, are we communicating the story that we want or think we are? And is there even any way for us to find out?
Yeah, you can't tell. You don't know what people are take from it. So, for instance, in Merchant of Venice, it's a comedy for the most part. There are comedic elements in it. And you can go as an actor and kind of go, oh, that laugh didn't land, whereas it would land at the Globe or whatever. Oh, no. And you're like, actually, no, get your head out of that. You have no idea what this audience is taking from it. In any, there's 900 people or 2,000 people in some of those big Chinese theatres. You don't really know. I would always go to find a theatre, if I could, wherever we were, especially in China, because I'm like, I don't want, no surtitles, no subtitles. I want to be able to, as much as I'm enjoying the fact that I'm in a completely unfamiliar environment on every level, I'm therefore looking for what is the universal thing that I do connect to. So I'd always go and see a play. I went to see a play in Shanghai, which was a production of 1984.
Okay.
And
George Orwell,
right,
based on the novel, right?
Right.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, I want to go and see that. I want to go and see that and see what they were like. So.
And it was a Chinese production.
It was a Chinese production.
Right.
So I'm sitting there. I'm not really being able to. I'm familiar with enough with the story that I can follow kind of what's going on. But for me, that's really important to kind of go, what is it that I'm receiving from this? Even though I don't understand the language, I don't understand anything that's going on, what they're saying to each other. What story am I receiving? And those performers would have no idea probably that someone like me was sitting there and they were communicating to me, and they communicated a huge amount. So you never know. You kind of have to do the thing as clearly as possible on stage and then let the audience take it.
It's so interesting thinking about what's the story we're communicating. Is our audience in the context of where we are now receiving it? I mean, I think in some ways, let's say it was a tour that just went around the UK, it would still be the same kinds of things, but maybe it would be less obvious because everybody speaks English. But depending on what towns you're in or different things, I had an experience where sometimes when you guys were, getting ready for the show or during the day, doing whatever you needed to do, they would send me to a school to do a workshop on the play, and often the schools would be coming that night or the next day. And I'll never forget, I think it was in Guangzhou, the first city we were in. And this was young groups. Usually I work with older or professional actors in teaching and things, but this was maybe, I don't know, 10 or younger, or maybe they just looked young. I can't remember now, it was so long ago, but I remember we did an exercise on Shylock's speech, where he has a famous speech, hath not a Jew eyes, hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, and it's really about empathy, and this character's trying to connect and kind of create understanding between these kind of warring two different sides in the play. And it's a really moving speech. So we worked on this speech, and then we were reflecting, and the English was certainly not this class's first language, and there was a translator for some of it, but they were trying to use English. And this little girl at one point, just her feedback was just that she learned that Shylock is just like her. And that was her phrase. And it really, I found it so moving when she just, in her, not speaking English very well, and she just tried to articulate that, like, she just kind of said, Shylock is me. And it was very, very moving, because I thought, here's this older Jewish man character written by a 400-year-old playwright in the UK. And here's this like 8 or 9-year-old, 10-year-old in Guangzhou feeling that they're the same as this character. So that connection, it's hard work, but you can find it.
Yeah. And I suppose that he, as an artist, is that he's just interested in what is it to be a human being. So that's what he's going for. And all the other stuff, now we'll write plays about specific pockets of people and specific communities and experiences. Whereas actually he's like all great writers or artists, Mozart, whoever, Da Vinci, it's like, what is it to be a human being? And that can translate with any person in any country in any time.
And finding that connection point where all those different people can connect to. I find, I know some of this story, but I want to ask you, because I find it quite inspiring for maybe someone who's listening who is interested in pursuing writing, acting, all the things that you do. When was the moment or the time in your life when you knew you wanted to do this, to be a performer?
I always was a performer, like a lot of us, like you. I'm the kid who's at school doing the funny voices, making the people laugh, making up stories. I remember I got pneumonia when I was 8, and one Christmas, and was really sick. I was really ill, and I was in hospital over Christmas. And I remember on children's wards they have like cartoon characters and superheroes painted on the walls. I don't know if you have that. Like there's Mickey Mouse and there's Superman on the walls.
In the school?
Or in the hospital? In the hospital, sorry.
Yeah. Making you feel better and things like that, kind of.
Right. And I would be like, at nighttime, and I remember like there'd be all these superheroes and characters on the walls. And at night, when all the lights were off, except the nurses' station at the top, as they'd be walking along, like they'd be casting their shadows, and like they'd be the characters on the wall would be like moving, and I'd be making up stories. And I always did that. Like, what were people doing? What was the story going on here? I'd see things, but I didn't know that was acting. I didn't know you could have a career as an actor or a performer. I had no frame of reference for that whatsoever. There was no one in my family was an actor. My mum was a single parent. There were 4 of us. I got 3 sisters. So she was on her own. So we didn't go to the theatre. She liked movies. Occasionally we might have enough money to go to the cinema or something. But being a professional actor or the world of theatre, I had no idea. So it wasn't until I left school, and then I'd been in sort of amateur dramatics society in town. I grew up in a town just outside London. So some friends, and that was for fun. And then my friends who were in that amateur dramatic society, they were the year above me. So they were going to a college in the next town to do performing arts. So when I did badly at school, because I wanted to be like a singer, at that point I was like, I want to be a songwriter, I want to be Stevie Wonder and just write songs. So I was kind of not really concentrating at school. And then when I did pretty badly, my mum was like, right, you need to go back to school and do your exams. But my friends were like, no, come and do this performing arts course with us. So I went, to cut a long story short, went to this college in the next town, and they'd already started their term. But they said, okay, well, you haven't done quite well enough in your grades, but you've got something. So come along and don't tell anyone and start the course. So when I did that, it was a 2-year performing arts course. Then at the end of that, my friends were in the year above. So at the end of my first year, going into the second year, they were leaving. And then what they were doing was going down to London now to go to drama school. So I was like, okay, I had no idea about that. Okay, you go and you train, right? And then after that, what happens? Oh, well, then you get an agent. Okay, and then you start working. So once I knew that, I was like, oh, that's what I've always done. I make stories and pretend to be different people and sing. And so once I realized that it was something that you could do with your life, then I was like, okay, great. So it wasn't like a moment where I was like, I want to do that. It was a moment where I was like, okay, that's what I do. So then I was very committed. Before that, it was like for fun.
Yeah.
But then once I knew it was a kind of more like a calling or something you do with your life, then I was like, I dove into it. And also then I was catching up because I left that course, performing arts course, came down to London, got into a drama school, and everyone else that I was surrounded by, all my peers, they had, their parents had taken them to Stratford-upon-Avon, and they knew about the National Theatre, and they knew about all these people, Oscar Wilde and Pinter, and I knew nothing about any of that. I didn't know who anyone was. I didn't know there was a National Theatre until I left drama school and had an audition there. And that was the first time I knew there was a National Theatre.
Okay, so I want to ask you just to share something that I think is so lovely about you, that when I think about what I know about you as a friend and your career, is that you obviously are very successful, and there's projects that you've done that stand out, that now people who are taken to the theater as kids, like you say you weren't, and who would go to Stratford or the National Theatre, are going to see you in these roles, or whether it be Aaron Burr and Hamilton, Othello at the National Theatre, or coming up, Hamlet at Chichester. But as you say, you didn't start that way. And are you comfortable sharing, like, you told me this lovely story about how getting into drama school, and they have to, you have to have a classical monologue, a modern monologue.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like for you?
And well, this is how green I was, right?
But this is what I think it's just really lovely to me.
So everything was new for me. So they say, okay, you have to go and audition. You're going to have to go and audition at the drama schools. Okay, what happens there? My friends had been in the year before, so they were able to go, this is what you do. You're supposed to take a classical piece and
like a speech,
piece,
for those who are listening, a monologue or a speech.
You do two speeches and a song.
Yeah.
So you do a classical old speech and then something modern and then a song. And then my friends had said, oh yeah, and they make you do, they're really into like emotion and stuff. So you have to do things where they make you do exercises where you're like getting really angry and throwing around chairs and stuff. That's all I knew. Like you go around and throw around chairs. So I was like, okay, this sounds crazy. I'm fine. Let's go and do this. So what am I going to do? I didn't know any Shakespeare. I didn't know.
So they say you need to do a classical piece, and normally that would be Shakespeare or something old, essentially.
Yeah. But I had no frame of reference what that was. Yeah. I wouldn't have even known that, like, Shakespeare is a classical thing, or someone like Chekhov is. I wouldn't have.
Sure.
I had no idea. What I thought it was just something old.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, right. Well, the thing that I know is old. The movie that had just come out, which was one of my favorites, was Hook, the Spielberg
such
movie.
A good movie.
It's great,
it's such
right?
a good movie.
With Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman. So, and they were like in old costumes, and it was pirates
and things.
Right. So I was like, okay, that's old. And I really loved Dustin Hoffman as Hook. So I was like, I'm going to do the speech that he does in this movie, Hook. I'm going to do Captain Hook. So I went and found the book of Peter Pan, and then found there was a speech, I was like, that's the one they must have used, model that Dustin Hoffman thing in the movie. So I kind of found it, the relevant speech, and I went along, and that was my classical speech.
What did they say?
They were like, they looked at me like I'd literally just landed from Mars. Which I didn't know at the time.
But the book is old. In your defense, you went and got the book, which is old. So, I mean, I'm just defending you, though. When you first told me this story, I thought it was
a stretch.
I know it's a stretch. We have to do a Shakespeare speech.
It's a book anyway, and it's about like pirates.
It's not a play.
It's not a play. It's a thing. I mean, it's old, and in my defense, it's like it doesn't really matter what you do. They're just looking to see like who are you? How do you connect to a speech or something? I didn't know anything about that time. But because I was so green, I wasn't like, now I'm absolutely horrified at looking back on it. But at the time I was like, yep, I did my thing and I learned it. And I loved the speech.
Yeah. And I love that story. I don't want you to feel horrified about that. And the reason I asked you to, because you've told me that on a sort of personally, that story. And I love it so much because to me, it encapsulates what makes you special and unique, I think, as a performer and a writer, is that I see you out in the world as your friend now for the last decade, 9 years, pursuing things that draw you, with your heart. It's not, I should go play Hamlet at the Royal Shakespeare Company because that's what success means. No. I want to write this play. I want to tell that story. I want to work with this director. Yeah. And it's not always what some people might look at as sort of like a logical step ladder of success. Yeah. And so I think that's, in some ways, to me, that's your gift, I think.
Yeah, I would, that kind of makes sense. The people I like are people who kind of just follow that path. And also, in the moment where I came to London and thought, okay, this is what I want to do, as well as it being, in the immediate sense, it was like, I am an actor, I'm a performer. That's just how I'm built. But then when I started to study and really find out about the world of theatre and drama and art, I was like, actually, the line that runs through all of it that I'm most connected to is the line that kind of comes through all of the kind of traditional cultures that go back a long way. There's always the person who gets up in the village and tells the story and sings the songs and sings the history of the people and the village and what happened. Whether you're in ancient Greece, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in Japan, there's always that person. And I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. And if you look at the Greeks, for instance, the same person who wrote the thing is the person who performs it, is the person who sings it. It's all one thing. Now we kind of divide it all up into like, you're the director, you're the writer, you're the performer, and you stay in your own little thing. Whereas actually the tradition I'm interested in is one where it's all one thing. It's all, and you just choose how best to tell that story, whether it's in music, whether it's through dance, movement, word, spoken word, whatever it happens to be. So for me, I'm like, that's what I'm interested in. I'm not necessarily interested in these are the steps that you should take in order to become a quote unquote successful actor.
I love it. It's like the you're talking about the Greeks. There's again, it's sort of the mythology of the birth of the actor, or the thespian was this priest in one way or another called Thespis, which is where the word thespian comes from, who was doing all that chanting and singing and sermonizing, like doing all of the things, telling stories and channeling and all of that kind of stuff. And then the sort of legend is that they then spoke a line, kind of like a line that a character would say. And instead of just saying, the story is a man walks down the street suddenly, and then the man said, and then they spoke, and that was kind of the birth of the actor. But I love this idea of doing all things, because I do think that when, if someone wants to, there's a lot of people who want to enter showbiz or acting or performing or whatever it is, or even just nowadays with YouTube and social media, and everybody seems to have their own reality TV show, and it's like all these different things. And I think people often are searching for like systems, or, they might look at someone like you and go, okay, this guy is successful. He's done this and this and this, or I saw him in this show and I really like that. I want to do that. What are the steps? But what I admire about you is it seems to be about following your curiosity and this idea that you're talking about of being all things: storytelling, performing, writing, music.
That's not to say that you can sort of do everything you want to do. One also has to know your strengths and your weaknesses, what you're not so good at. But in terms of just the source of like, okay, what is, and you'll know about this as a director, it's like you say, what is this story? All the stories have gone around. Do you know what I mean? You're just basically, it's all one poem. It's one thing. Yeah. So you're sort of telling your bit of it in this particular moment, and how best do you serve that? Is it through music? Shakespeare's great at that. At a certain point in each play, there has to be a song now. At a certain point, it's like, okay, we're going to go from very formal verse to much more free prose. Like he adapts and uses whatever he needs at any given moment to tell the story. So therefore, the story is always first. It's not really about, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to, what I want to put across. It's like, what is the story here? What is the situation? What are you trying to tell? And then it's about going, is this a documentary that I'm going to tell this through, or which I've done, or is this a piece of music, or is this a group of songs? Whatever it happens to be, I want to be able to tell the story and serve the story as best as possible. And yeah, so I'm curious in that sense, and just follow that curiosity.
Well, I'm really interested in what draws you into these projects. You mentioned you have a documentary. It's called Musifier, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that was about 10, 15 years ago.
A while ago now.
And it's this lovely exploration of you and your friend interviewing all these extremely well-known people about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
People like Judi Dench and, all of these great Shakespearean actors.
Yeah.
And again, it links to me with something that I think to myself, like, were you nervous reaching out to these people? Or was it just, this is the story I want to tell, and therefore I need these people to help me tell it?
Yeah, basically. I mean, and it came from the point of, leading on from your first question, of like, when I was starting out, I didn't know anything about Shakespeare. So I kind of, it took someone explaining to me, okay, well, this is a Shakespeare play. This is a situation. It's Romeo and Juliet, and you kind of go from there. Mm-hmm. So once I had a really good teacher called Claudette Williams, and once she started explaining and opened up that world for me about what the plays were and what the situations were, I flourished with it. I loved Shakespeare. I couldn't get enough of it. So I was like, I want to make something which does a similar thing for other. I would have liked to have seen, when I was starting out, when I was 18, I'd have loved to have seen a film where people who do it really well, Shakespeare, talk about it and talk about what their experience of it was. And interestingly, everyone, whether it's Judi Dench or James Earl Jones, respect to whoever it happens to be, they all said the same thing in the way that little girl said, I'm the same as Shylock. All these great actors were going, at one point, I didn't know anything about Shakespeare, and I was really intimidated by it, and it was confusing. But then someone showed me, and then once that happened, I was flying. So I was like, I want to make something which explores that world, so that people who aren't so familiar with Shakespeare can kind of go, oh, right, okay, well, Judi Dench struggles with it as well, in the same way that I am. Sat in my class at school going, I feel like an idiot. No, Judi Dench felt
Everybody
like that.
does.
Mark Rylance, everyone feels like that.
But what's so inspiring to me is it's almost like your ignorance isn't the right word, but sort of innocence in when you first started, of not being exposed to, this is the successful, scary, big theater where the people do Shakespeare and things like that. I feel like it's such a strength because, I think to myself, someone who maybe was more aware of those things perhaps would create some story in their mind where I just feel like it becomes a block for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like I think about that documentary. You were a working actor at that time, but you were a young actor, and you were in your career, but you were still kind of like, you weren't Judi Dench in the sense of like someone who's been around for a long time and done all these things. So I think to myself, like, I might have been paralyzed with fear reaching out to those people, thinking, oh, they don't want to talk to me. So it's almost like, I don't know, the awareness of that maybe can stop you. And like, I just think it's a good lesson for people. Yeah. I
think the more you don't, it's like when you're young, you've got all this courage anyway. But certainly if, I had no frame of reference, I had nothing to lose. Talking to Judi Dench, just like, well, the one thing I knew was, okay, well, we'll bypass the agents if possible, because the agents are going to go, no.
Yeah.
But, I knew enough. I knew Ian McKellen. I'd met him a couple of times. I knew Judi Dench in the sense I'd met her. So I had some way in to say, I'm not a complete crazy person. We met at such and such and such.
Sure, a little bit of a link.
Just so that, and then if you can just explain to them what it was that we were doing. It was my friend Dan Poole, who I trained with at drama school. If you can explain to them what it is, and they're like, okay, yeah, great. Let's do it. Come over to the house and we'll do an interview. And so it was, ignorance can be bliss sometimes, I think, because you don't have any expectations about what you can and can't do. You just do what you'd like to do.
One of the first plays I directed was Hamlet. I think I was 22, barely, or 21, 22. And I feel like I had that kind of experience where now I've seen a bunch of productions of it and I know the history of it. And I'd probably be more intimidated now, even though I'm more experienced, if I were to direct that play than back then. I just thought, I just want to do a good play. This is obviously a good play. So I'm going to do this play, and I learned a lot from that. But okay, so I'm curious, what gets in your way then? When you're pursuing projects, whether it be writing or acting, creative storytelling, anything that falls under that umbrella of your work, what do you feel gets in your way? I don't mean literally like, this person took the job and I wanted that job, but I mean like, why did they get the role?
Yeah. Well, that happens.
Which happens, but I mean, I guess kind of emotionally, or what do you find is the challenge of making work at this point?
It's the same thing that I think everyone is faced with. Certainly in this society, which is, we live in a society where it's very much divided up into class, first of all. And then within that, there's many, many, many more divisions about sort of pigeonholes about where people should be, let alone when you then bring race into it. So you're a black and brown person. It's like society says this is what you are, let alone what you should do. So for me, part of my thing is also about forget artistry at the moment. Just as a human being, every day I've got to sort of navigate through a world which says, before you even get to this is what you can do, a world which says this is what you are. So you then have to, if you're going to survive that and live any kind of life, you have to work out how you can not be defined by any of that. So for me, it's all about kind of going, if I feel like this documentary about Shakespeare is what I should be doing right now and I'm really interested in, then I'm going to go and do that. At the same time, you then have to then go, right, okay, now we've made this film, BBC, were you interested in broadcasting it? Or Sky, are you interested in broadcasting it? Or if you write a play, you might have to go to the Royal Court Theatre, which new writing happens, or you might go to the National Theatre. I wrote a play and they helped me develop that. So you have to get to someone. Shakespeare has to go to his benefactors, the King's Men or the Chamberlain's Men or whoever they are. There's always someone who provides the money, or Michelangelo, Beethoven. You've always got someone. Artists have to have someone who provides the money, or at least the platform for exposure. And once you get into that, not necessarily making the thing, but in terms of communicating whatever it is, you need that person, you need that platform or that institution, more often than not, especially now. And that's the tricky thing, because then people are saying, okay, well, we like this kind of idea, we're interested in this kind of work, and maybe not necessarily that. And the things that I'm interested in aren't like, okay, well, Hamilton has come out, so let's make lots of products like Hamilton.
Yeah.
That's not the way my brain works.
And is that what a lot of people are trying to get, you feel? Like that they want the next thing?
Not necessarily for me, but
right.
when the thing drops, which is important, then you see lots of things off the back of that, which take from that thing. Whether it's Star Wars or whether it's Michael Jackson's Thriller or whatever. Once something happens, the industry tends to go, make more of that. Because I don't get that. They want to make money. But if you look at Lin-Manuel at the time, we had just come off the back of all of these sort of renaissance of musical theatre comedies. You've got The Producers, you've got Book of Mormon, Avenue Q, Spamalot, all these big comedy shows that had come up, which had then replaced all of the big romantic musicals, Les Mis from the 80s and 90s, Les Mis and Miss Saigon, Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
So in the middle of when Lin-Manuel writes his show, it's like, it's not the kind of show which is being done, let alone the subject matter of like this founding father who was like this finance guy and comes up with the whole financial system. And then
I never even heard of him before the show.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Hamilton.
Me either.
Or Aaron Burr.
Right. So that's a kind of very left field idea. But you have to then rely on there's going to be someone with the sort of potential to help you kind of realize this thing who is going to go, okay, right, go for that. You do it. So that for me is the tricky thing. It's like holding on to I always think there's like a little sort of kind of diamond within all young artists who,
Yeah.
before you go to drama school, before you get an agent, before you get an Oscar, before any of that happens, you're a little kid in your room going, I really like this song, or I really like doing this, coming up with this dance or whatever. And then you go into drama, so you come to the big city, to New York, to Paris, to London, and then all the stuff is just on top of that. But you have to keep hold of that thing which was there originally, because that's the thing which is going to help you create the work which someone goes, oh, wow, that's different. It's not like what everyone else is doing.
And sometimes it isn't that, like I think it's not everything you create is going to be the Hamilton, obviously. But I think it's such a beautiful sentiment in what you're saying, because when I think about these phenomenon, I was thinking like Eat, Pray, Love popped into my head, because when that book came out, like Elizabeth Gilbert was a successful writer and she wrote in magazines and other books and things. She wasn't, Stephen King. She had written 200 bestsellers or whatever. Same thing with Hamilton. Like Lin-Manuel had written a successful musical, but it wasn't like the global, massive crazy thing that Hamilton was. And it's holding on to that. I think holding on to that diamond is so difficult because, of course, when he was creating that, putting that together with Tommy Kail, the director of Hamilton, I would imagine they weren't thinking, how do we make the next Hamilton? Because Hamilton hadn't existed.
Right.
And it's like, how do you, the further you get in your career, because now you've been in Hamilton and you won an Olivier for that, and you've played big roles in all the different theaters, and you're about to play Hamlet. How do you still hang on to the diamond and not get distracted by knowing certain things have been successful and certain things haven't been or didn't become as big as the Hamiltons? How do you have methods for hanging on to that diamond, or is that just something that you naturally do?
It's something I naturally try to do, but then like you say, the older you get and the more experience you get, the more difficult that is, because when you're young and starting out, you're just burning with all this energy of stuff you want to say, and you want to get away from your family and do your thing and find your own voice. And
the adventure. You want to go on the adventure.
Right. But the older you get...
And you don't know. I feel like the older you get, you see the patterns.
Yes.
I've done this and that was successful. I did this and that was successful. I did this and that failed.
Yeah.
And you could probably easily get caught, maybe subconsciously, in trying to replicate those patterns or something.
Yeah,
like that.
especially
if
something's been successful, you're like, oh, that worked.
How do I replicate that?
Yeah, and you've got to check that.
Like, for example, a couple years ago, you did Hamilton. That was 2016, 17? No,
2017, 18.
So you did that for a year. First production in the West End in London. You went in Olivier for playing Aaron Burr. This is a massive peak in your career. How did you cope once you left the show? Like the year or two after, did you get caught up in trying to find the next thing that was going to be the award-winning thing? Or did you go off into the mountains for 6 months? Like, what did you do in the time, in the sort of wake of that? I
would just like doing stuff that I haven't done before. So I always want to do something completely different. As long as it's completely different. So the thing I did after that was an Ibsen play. And I got Rosmersholm. And I got to do, which I had never heard of. Ian Rickson is a brilliant director. And having had that Hamilton moment, it meant that there were a few people who were maybe slightly more interested in who I was and maybe doing something, which was great. But so I used that moment to sort of to try and find something completely different. And then lockdown happened immediately.
Oh,
so
okay.
That it was only 2019.
Lockdown
happened. So I had a year after Hamilton, kind of, and I did a couple of
sort
plays.
of forced to not do anything in a way. Do different things.
In a way, what's great about that?
Yeah.
And we were together for some of that time.
Yeah.
Was that it did exactly
we live in
what
the
you're
same
saying.
building, just for context for people. We lived in the same building.
Yeah, we weren't together. But it made the entire planet do what you're talking about, which is everyone had to go, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
We're in lockdown. Do I have to rethink my whole life? Do I have to think my career? Can I live in London anymore? Do I need a different thing? What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this period? And I felt that. But as artists, we're kind of used to that of like, what now?
I think, and I actually think your point about doing something completely different, going, okay, I've got this cachet that I can kind of choose a little bit, in terms of like, I want to do this or this. But what I really admire is you didn't just do Hamlet right away or something like that. That would be maybe more obvious, or maybe more taking advantage of the Hamlet or the Hamilton moment. I don't know. But you did Rosmersholm, and as you say, you hadn't heard of it. And I don't think I'd heard of it. And it was I saw it was a great production. And here's something different and unique. You completely went into something different. In a way, I guess what that maybe did was it took away some of the pressure of it all of a sudden being the next Hamilton, because it could never be, because it's a completely different thing.
Yeah. And also Hamilton was such a great experience that I'm like, I'm good. Like, if nothing ever happens to me after that, I'm good. That was such a beautiful experience. The people that I met in terms of the company, and one of whom I saw Jam, who played Hamilton last night. And, Tommy Cale, who directed it, is one of my best friends. And I was talking to him yesterday. So that kind of thing, as well as the piece itself, meant that was as beautiful experience as you're going to get. So for me, I'm like, I don't need to rush and try and recreate that.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, so in our last 5 or so minutes here, just to dwell on the Hamilton a little bit, talking about it, is obviously I've been reading. I can't believe I haven't read it yet.
I can't believe
sometimes it takes me a while to read books.
Lin-Manuel read that in like 2 hours.
Well, he wrote the foreword, so he had to read it. And actually, it's a very easy, quick read. So
exactly.
I read. Okay, listen, I'm sorry I hadn't read it yet, but in my defense, I read a lot for all of the projects I'm doing. So I'm reading something for, whether it be an interview for this or for a play or something like that. That's my excuse.
I'm kidding.
But also the thing I think about it is very, even though I had nothing to do with the process of Hamilton, is very personal in a way, because I got to know you just before this whole process. So the beginning of your book, for those listening, Giles wrote a book. It's called Hamilton and Me, an Actor's Journal. And it's essentially his journal entries from the very beginning of the process of Hamilton, from the auditions until the very end. And, the first chapter is while we were on tour. And I find it's very actually moving to read, because it's so personal and there's something really beautiful about it. And so I want to do 2 things. One of them, I have to get my computer for.
Uh-oh.
No, I was trying to think, because I know you so well. Mm-hmm. I think I know you so well.
Or do you?
But what would be an interesting thing to bring into this interview that's the sound of my computer, before we end. And my assistant producer, Adam, represents a lot of people, which is big fan of Hamilton. So I said, why don't you record a question? I haven't heard it, so I have no idea what it is.
Okay.
We'll play it.
Yeah.
See if you want to answer it.
Okay.
Hello, Giles. I'm so excited you're on the show, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. My question revolves around the best song in Hamilton, in my opinion. Wait for it. To me, it has always felt like the only mask-off moment for Bert in the musical, where he, just for a moment, breaks out of his shrewd political tactic of waiting for it, only to regain composure as the song concludes. I just wondered how you interpreted this song as a part of your version of Bert's story.
Wow.
Wait for it. Such a good song.
Tommy will love that question, because Tommy, I remember one when we came to that song, Tommy said, okay, what happens in this moment for Burr is that he's on his own, and he has been, if I have to remember this now, he's just been faced with the question from Hamilton about if Burr has fallen in love and he's met this woman. Hamilton says, provokes him and says, well, why don't you just go and get this girl? If you love this girl, why don't you go and get her? And then Hamilton leaves Burr on his own, and it's the first time he's on his own. And so Tommy said, in that moment, exactly as that question implies, Tommy's words were, for a brief moment, he does let his mask drop, and he communicates directly to the audience and goes through this question of okay, well, why? As far as Hamilton is concerned, he's impulsive. So whatever he wants, whatever he thinks about as a person, Hamilton, he goes and does. So if he thinks we need to be away from Britain and George III, he's going to rouse the troops and we're going to make that happen. He's impulsive and he's immediate. Whereas Burr's much, much more thinking about the long game. But in that moment of that song, he's questioning whether that's the right way to go, because he admires what Hamilton does, and Hamilton gets results. So Burr's like, is is my way the right way? I think it is, but maybe Hamilton's right. And so he in doing that, in having that dilemma and that conversation with the only people he trusts in the play, I think, which is the audience, he lets his mask down and says, okay, well, is this the right thing to do? Is this not the right thing to do? And he talks it through and reasons it through. And I remember I've probably put it slightly more articulately in the book because I was living that at the time. But he reasons this through and comes to the conclusion, actually, no. I do need to hang on. Something tells me to hang on, because prior to the song, one of the last things Hamilton says as he leaves, it struck me, is he says, I'll never understand you. He says to Burr, I will never understand you. Now, that to me was quite important. So it's somewhere in that song, in Wait For It, Aaron Burr rehears, in my interpretation, rehears what Hamilton says. I will never understand you. And what Burr knows about Hamilton is that this is a man who makes it his business, Hamilton, to understand everything. So everything in that play is about Hamilton going, okay, I've got a question here. What am I going to do? He reads. The first thing we see about him in that opening of that show is him reading these books, reading, taking information, learning how things work. He makes it his mission to understand everything. So for that person to say, I will never understand you, Burr goes, there is something. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't know me. I know me. I feel like I do. And that, the diamond we were talking about earlier on, Burr's diamond, he's like, no, I'm gonna keep hold of that and protect that. And then once he's had that conversation, he says, okay, now, and Tommy's words were, and then he puts his mask back on, which is what he shows to all of New York society. And then he kind of carries on with the story. So that's a really cool question.
Wow, I love it. Well, I'm sure Adam will love that answer.
That's a great
question. Can you believe it? We're out of time.
Oh my God.
I just want to quickly mention at the end of your book, you tell this beautiful story of when Hamilton performed at the Oliviers, the year that you won.
Yeah.
And how there was I encourage people to get the book and read it. So I won't read the whole thing. But it's just this spontaneous moment that happens backstage at the Royal Albert Hall where everybody starts singing Amazing Grace. And it just kind of spontaneously happens and then dissolves and then you go off. And it was just it wasn't for anyone but you guys together. And I found it really, really moving. And I'm just going to read this. I'll just read the page and then, then that'll be it. So you say, suddenly from nowhere, someone began to sing Amazing Grace. I think it was Rachel. It just rang out. Then someone else's voice joined hers, 2 voices. Then someone else, until before long it was all of us singing. Harmonies, more harmonies, layers, counters, groups, riffs, pairings, rhythms, volumes. Hamilton choir in the belly of the Albert Hall. The room was ringing with voices singing, and it was the quality of the sound. It rose and cascaded and rang out, deafening. No one really led it or drew it to a close. It sort of just happened. All of us contributed to it, and afterwards we went up and opened the show. It was one of the most powerful moments I've ever experienced. Something within those few seconds encapsulated what I value so much about the Hamilton experience and theater as an art form. This is the part that I love. Some spark occurs, takes on some beautiful life of its own. It's intensely powerful. It's felt by everyone who witnesses it. And then, as quickly as it came, is gone, leaving its impression on your soul. So beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us at the Big Smoke. I love you.
Thanks for having me. I love you.
When the bells ring out across the Big Smoke, we like to hear how you are fostering connection and community. This week, our assistant producer Adam hit the streets and asked a special question about your literary delights.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam. I'm out and about in my own Big Smoke of Brighton at the moment, and I'm here to find out what people's favourite books are, because we are doing a really exciting book club initiative with the Big Smoke, but more on that in a little bit. Now, thank you so much for asking, but what's my favourite book? Well, my favourite book is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Milner. It's just, it's the story of Achilles that you've probably heard it in school, but it's just told in such a beautiful way, from such a different perspective. And I just think it's really worth a read. It's actually perfect for, summer. So get an oat latte from an independent coffee shop, sit outside wear the SPF and have a good read, because it's just such a beautiful love story. I've laughed, I've cried, I've done all of the above, and I just think it's really worth everyone sticking into at some point in their lives. So yeah, now onwards to find more people and what they've been enjoying reading recently.
Hi, my name is Amy, I'm from Ashford, and my favourite book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, because I think that as a young woman in her 20s, it perfectly kind of encapsulates how there's so many different paths in front of you, and yeah, the difficulty is to pick where to go and how to do so. Although Sylvia herself met some quite unfortunate ends, I think that the book overall is quite hopeful about how to move forward and, do you know what I mean, the joy of having so many different opportunities. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
My name is Julian. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver is one of the most moving books I've read about social deprivation, child slavery and drug addiction. The novel is extraordinary in capturing the abysmal, ever-spiralling downward journey of a Melungeon cared-for country boy. Yes, I had to look up Melungeon too. This is a remarkable reconfiguration of Dickens's David Copperfield, the Victorian London-based setting applied to contemporary rural Appalachian USA. The storyline is brilliantly developed and well woven, full of memorable characters, emotionally sharp, funny, unsentimental and poignant. Full of anger, compassion and a powerful polemic for change. Strongly recommended.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and I think my favorite book is The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. It's kind of a pretentious answer, but I think a lot of what he says in that book has formed the basis for a lot of the meaning I find in my life now.
Hi, Fiona from Lewis here, introducing Hans Verlade's book, Alone in Berlin. Following the death of their son in action in the Second World War, Otto and Anna devise a simple postcard campaign to undermine the Nazi regime. They manage their campaign with diligence and commitment, while at the same time questioning whether it is having any impact, and knowing that if they're discovered, they will face torture and execution. Otto and Anna remain resolute in their belief. We must do this. The story revolves around the question of moral choice in a context of extreme terror, injustice and isolation. It resonates across time and place, encouraging me to ask myself, under what conditions would I find the courage to commit, to remain resolute and stand up to the abuse of power?
Ooh, I have plenty to add to my reading list now. So, Adam mentioned our new Big Smoke book club. This is a chance for you to get involved in the show and pick up a book you might not otherwise have discovered. Our first pick is Queer as Folklore by Sacha Coward, who has kindly given us permission to share a little from his book. Transport yourself to a pride parade in any major city in the world. Consider the costumes you might see. Among the glitter and feathers, tank tops and hoodies, tiaras and Doc Martens, certain themes might recur. Whether in Paris, Rio, Tokyo, or Sydney, you will see papier-mâché unicorn heads trailing sequins, drag queens wearing mermaid tails, and more fairy wings and cat ears than you can shake a trident at. To be clear, having a love for magic, mythical creatures, and folklore is not something unique or specific to the LGBTQ+ community. Still, I would argue that the extent and depth of this goes beyond the status quo. From the language we use, both flattering and derogatory, fairy, bear, wolf, unicorn, to the iconography used by LGBTQ+ charities and groups, there is something going on here. More than meets the eye. This book was written to explore this, unpack this, and to make a statement. That statement is that we haven't just borrowed these symbols or co-opted them, we are woven into them. The bedtime stories of mermaids, vampires, and fairies that many of us grew up loving were often created or contain monsters and characters that were inspired by people who had similar lives and loves to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people living today. These are stories that echo back hundreds and even thousands of years. The monsters and heroes we dress up as, the designs we tattoo on our bodies with, and the niche areas of academia we tend to throw ourselves into are no accident or mere quirk. In fact, to truly understand who queer people are today involves an adventure into the fantastical stories of our past. Sound intriguing to you? Share this episode with your friends and join the book club together. You can find more info and how to join in the show notes. Wandering through the streets of London, history peers at us from every corner. Yet few people realize how close they are to the weird, wonderful, and sometimes terrifying history of medicine. Whether it's sipping lattes in Camden next to the very spot where the Black Plague broke out, or sauntering out of Tottenham Court Road Station only to find yourself face to face with the site of St. Giles Hospital for Lepers, centuries of medical history surrounds us. So, let's go for a checkup. A few years back in time, down a murky street in Soho, and visit with our resident GP, Dr. Quack.
All the medical procedures mentioned are real medical procedures used throughout history. The following is an exchange between a 16th century doctor and his patient, a turnip farmer called Mr. Johnson, who has come in to ask about a minor eye infection. Hello, Debbie. Could you send Mr. Johnson in, please? Hello, Mr. Johnson. Take a seat. My name is Dr. Quack. How can we help you today? Oh, I see. Your eye. Yes, quite inflamed. Looks quite inflamed, doesn't it? Just the one eye? Right. No, I can see it's the left one. I was saying it. Never mind. Any other symptoms? You feel a bit hot. Okay, could be a fever. We'll take a look at that. You seem nervous, Mr. Johnson. Because your wife came to see me. Right. And what did we treat her for? Ingrown toenail? Oh, yes! Mrs. Johnson, yes. Her shoes were too tight and she developed an ingrown toenail, which made working on don't tell me, turnip farm. Yes, that's it. I remember your turnip farmers. Ingrown toenail made farming agony. Right. So why does that make you nervous? Well, we had to cut her leg off. She had an ingrown toenail. Okay, well, hands up. We may have gone a little high. I mean, if I'm going to be completely honest, the surgeon got the wrong end of the leg, really. And the thing with amputation is, once you've started, you've kind of got to go with it. In for a penny, in for a pound, if you know what I mean. Yes, she almost bit straight through the stick we gave her and then passed out. We thought we might have lost her, but after some Dutch fumigation, we managed to resuscitate her. What's Dutch fumigation? Oh, it's an old method for reinvigorating someone who has fainted. You simply take a good lungful of tobacco smoke and blow it directly into the patient's anus. Well, I think thank you might be the words you're looking for. If you think I enjoy blowing smoke up a sweaty turnip farmer's anus, you'd be half right. Well, she was worried she wouldn't be able to help round the farm. So how's she doing? She's dead. Infection and died. Right. And need I ask where the infection was? On the leg. Yeah. Well, that's medicine. So back to your eye. A few routine questions. When did this start? 3 days ago. All right. And do you know of any foreign bodies that may have entered the eye in the last few days? Any flying turnips? No, of course not. And you've been praying regularly? Every night? Okay. Well, then it's a bit of a mystery. Right. Well, first of all, swallow this spider for your fever. And in terms of the eye, luckily for you, this isn't 1495, and medication for this kind of problem has come a long way. The old tried and tested method of jabbing at the eye with a sharp stick is a thing of the past. Though, to be fair, results of clearing the infection were almost 100%. But that was largely because the whole eye would be removed by accident or design, which would clear the infection, but often result in death. So, holistically, not the best approach. But we're now experimenting with some very exciting innovations from the continent. Hey, now, Mr. Johnson. That is incredibly xenophobic. The 100 Years' War was a long time ago. Let's let bygones be bygones, shall we? Or maybe I'll just get out my pointy stick. I think I've still got it around here somewhere. I'm joking, Mr. Johnson. Sit down. No. What we're going to do today is to administer human feces into the eye. Human feces. Yeah. Mr. Johnson, as I say, this isn't the Dark Ages. I'm not suggesting I'm about to get onto my haunches and curl one out into your eye cavity. I'm simply going to take some human excrement that's been dried out, ground into a fine powder, and blow it violently into your eyeball. Oh, don't be like that, you big wuss. What are you, a Frenchman? No, I shouldn't say that. The door is locked, Mr. Johnson. We'd never get to test the medicines if I left it open. Stop crying. It'll make the infection worse. Really? You make me out to be some sort of butcher. Though actually saying that, our surgeon, the one that lopped off your wife's leg, actually is also a butcher if you want some meat. So, now come and sit back down. Let me blow this poo into your eye and you'll be on your way back to your turnip farm as good as new. Right, now, let me just get down here. I'd close the good eye if I was you. And so, keep the area clean. Well, as clean as you can. Mr. Johnson, if you could quiet down a bit, you have got to hear this. Stop screaming. Debbie, just wondered if we'd had any follow-up on Mr. Johnson. He went blind and died, did he? Bother. Well, could have been anything, I suppose, but I'll add it to the notes. Send the next one in.
And that was our appointment with Dr. Quack. It's time to play Victorian parlor games. All games, from the Roman gladiatorial battles to a quiet round of cards or charades, are imitations of real-life situations. The activity of playing games is the expression of an instinct, for play is far older than culture, older even than prehistory. So here's our offering to you, a way to connect with your friends and family and have a bit of fun. Today's game's name is Unforgettable, the Elephant's Foot Umbrella Stand. Here's how it works. First, one player is chosen to be the leader. Before the game begins, the leader secretly decides on a rule. Every acceptable answer must follow this rule, but nobody else knows what it is. The leader then starts the game by saying, I went to the store and bought, and then names an object that fits their secret rule. For example, if the rule is that the item must end with the letter T, the leader might say, I went to the store and bought a tart. Then it's the next player's turn. They must also say, I went to the store and bought, and then guess an item. If their guess follows the secret rule, the leader accepts it and it's the next player's turn. If it doesn't, the leader says, the store has no, and then the item. For example, if a player says, I went to the store and bought a cake, and cake doesn't end with a T, the leader would reply, the store has no cake. Here's the twist. Before making their guess, each player must first repeat the full list of all previously accepted items in order. So memory matters just as much as figuring out the rule. The goal is to work out what the secret rule is before anyone else, or to keep playing until everyone has figured out the rule. The leader's rule could be anything. Could be something you can eat. Could be a word with double letters. Could be a word with exactly 5 letters, or, if the leader's feeling cruel, items could have to follow the alphabet in reverse order. And that's how you play Elephant's Foot Umbrella Stand. Wait, why is it called that? No one seems to know. Well, good luck with it. And don't forget, the store is picky and the storekeeper is watching. All right, time to find out if you stumped the room. First, I ask, in Spielberg's film Hook, which now famous actor made one of their very first screen appearances as young Wendy, Peter Pan's future wife, a few years before winning an Oscar for playing someone else who fell in love with Shakespeare?
What's your name? Wendy Moira Angela Darling. What's yours?
If you said Gwyneth Paltrow, you're right. She has a blink-and-you-miss-it flashback cameo as teenage Wendy, the girl Peter eventually marries. A few years later, she'd win the Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. Not bad for someone who started out in Neverland. Next, I asked, before pistols at dawn, there were rules to keep duels civilized. In the musical Hamilton, those rules inspired one of the show's biggest songs. What real-life document were they based on? The answer is the Code Duello, an 18th century document that laid out the formal rules of dueling. How to challenge someone, how to choose a second, and how to fight honorably. Lin-Manuel Miranda adapted these rules into the 10 Duel Commandments.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 Duel Commandments.
Giving Hamilton's fatal duel a modern rhythmic structure with real historical roots. And finally, I asked, in Hamlet, which character never says a single word on stage, but still sparks one of the most famous speeches in all of theatre?
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. A fellow of infinite jest.
If you said Yorick, you nailed it. He's the jester, dead long before the play begins. But when Hamlet finds his skull in Act 5, it launches, Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest. He has no lines, no entrances, just a skull with enough emotional weight to bring the whole play into focus. So, how'd you do? Were you stumped? Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and put their Hook, Hamilton, and Hamlet knowledge to the test. Well, that's our show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got new episodes out every fortnight, so don't forget to follow on your podcast app of choice. If you're interested in a peek behind the curtain or finding out more info on our fantastic guests, sign up to our newsletter at thebigsmokevariety.com. Thanks for listening.